Welcome to the Awakening Together YouTube channel. We're glad you're here. If you'd like more information on our community, visit our website awakening-together.org. In this video, we will be sharing a satsang that we recently had with Reverend Ute Maria Cedilla. She was interviewed by Reverend Christy Goldsmith. Enjoy the satsang.
So good evening, everyone, and welcome to Awakening Together's monthly satsang. As you all know, you're here to hear my discussion with Reverend Ute Maria Cedilla, and I'm sure you've all read her bio, so I won't repeat that, but I do want to share some things about her that I know personally that will really inform our discussion this evening. Ute Maria is a person who has really carved her own spiritual path, and she's done that since a very young age. She's always listened to her inner guidance, and that has brought her to a life that I think of as being very contemplative and imbued with direct experiences with the divine, listening beyond words, and deep devotion. So those will more or less be the underlying themes that are underlying our discussion tonight. So in that vein, Ute Maria, I'd like to welcome you to Awakening Together. And I don't see you.
I'm right there.
Oh, here you are. Hi, welcome. I'm so
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. I think you have a very unique spiritual path that you've carved for yourself. So I think it will be interesting for us to hear your personal insights. And I think a nice place to start might be if you can perhaps describe your spiritual journey throughout your life in terms of the prompts you've received through your own inner guidance. You know, starting with your childhood, you've had some interesting experiences, I know.
Yes, thank you, Reverend Christy. Thank you so much. Yes, I was born in Germany, in Cologne, Germany, to a Protestant mother and a Catholic father. And in hindsight, I see how my mother really gave me the Protestant type of beautiful spirituality, but we never talked about it outwardly. So just in hindsight, I see how she gave me certain things that I value greatly, like the Advents and Christmases and things like that were very spiritual. And I took for granted in a way. And when I was a young girl, I lived in Germany until I was 9 years old. And I didn't have really any church experience at that time, but I had in my heart, I always asked questions about God. And my mother would say in German, der liebe Gott. Der liebe Gott. So that means like the good God, the loving God. So I was raised with that idea of that God is a loving God. But I had in my heart that feeling I wanted to know more about God. And so very suddenly, when I was 9 years old, we moved to France, to the east, to the Alsace-Lorraine, into a small village. It was a really tiny village. And it had this little white church in the middle. It was totally Catholic. In France, basically, the villages would probably be like it would be a Catholic village or Protestant village. They didn't mix. It was really kind of interesting. And so I just was attracted to that church. My parents didn't go to church at all. My brother and sister would go with me. And so we would go to church on Sundays. And it was the Latin Mass. And of course, I was starting to learn French. I went to a one-room schoolhouse. And as a German, we weren't all that welcome in that area. You know how the there was arguing between France and Germany as to who this territory belonged to, and it kept going back and forth between France and Germany. So there was some of that feeling of not being really welcome, but that passed, and I focused really on being in that spiritual place that it was. I don't know why I was so attracted to the Latin and the chanting and at noon, the Angelus. I don't know if you have ever heard that, but it's like, those church bells would ring like a certain rhythm, and everybody would stop and everybody would say a prayer. It was so beautiful. And it was farmers and countryside and fruit trees and vegetables in the garden and animals, like they raised animals and all. So I was really like part of this grounding feeling of being part of the earth and being part of simplicity. It was like a simple life, and it was probably, I must say, I think it was the time I loved most in my life, those years in that little village. It's called Saint-Avold. So then we moved to a bigger place, to a bigger city from there. And I went to Catholic school for 1 year. And I decided I was going to be a nun. And my father pulled me out of there like so quick. I wasn't able to, he wouldn't let me stay there. Because I had this mentor, this nun was mentoring me, and she was really, I loved her. I really loved her. And so I would follow her and continue in that vein. And then when I went to high school in France, I did not really have any big religious experience, except that we had a religion class, and everybody laughed at me because I liked it so much. It was just like so silly. But we had these feelings of maybe something was wrong with me because I liked it so much. And we would have this workbook, and we would draw in it and decorate it and write things in it and so on. So I spent that time. And then after high school, I basically spent quite a few years outside of the church, completely. I just stopped. It was like all of a sudden, no more. And so I got married and all those things. And all of a sudden, we were in America now. I was married to a Navy man. And so we ended up in America, in Chicago, after a little trip around Scotland, by the way. And then I ended up in Chicago, and I started feeling the feeling of being called. And I kept having this dream about somebody was visiting our house, and I didn't have a bed for whoever was visiting us. I didn't know who it was. And it kept recurring and recurring and recurring. And all of a sudden, it kind of came into my mind that I didn't have a place for Christ to lay his head. And so I started going back to church, and that was a Catholic church. And I had difficulties in my marriage, and so I didn't want to leave my children at home, and I took them to a babysitter. And just somebody she was recommended to me, and so she had 2 kids, and so she would watch my children. And we had this little Sunday meeting with a woman who was really into esoteric teachings. Her name was Phyllis, and she would come, and I just wanted it. I wanted it so much. It was like, give me more, give me more, give me more. And she didn't really want to give too much, but she did continue. And then as we kind of were together there for a while in talking a lot about spirituality, Judy is her name, said, there's a church in Chicago that's kind of teaching this. And I said, really? And she says, yeah, it's called Unity. Want to try? And so we packed up the children. We went to Mass, both of us, and then we went to this Unity church, which was like, it was incredible. It was like, I came home, right? It was then my thing. And then they started teaching classes they were teaching classes on Wednesday nights, and I would attend. And they said, well, if you take classes, you might as well take them for credit. And so I did. And so that's how I ended up becoming a licensed Unity teacher. So that was my first phase of my whole trip to Unity.
Okay. And you had some experiences with some books with Emma. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
You want to go to Emma? Yeah, okay. So I was in Unity, and I was assisting this minister, and we had to move the church, and we moved the bookstore. And so there were 2 books left on the shelf, and they were slightly damaged, and they literally fell at me. They just like, it was like this feeling of like they came at me. And those were the 2 books by Emma Curtis Hopkins. At the time, they didn't have much published by Emma Curtis Hopkins. And so I started reading Scientific Christian Mental Practice, and it totally changed my life. It's a mental science, and it really took me deeper. And then I had High Mysticism, and I tried to read it and couldn't. I couldn't read it. And I was just bound and determined that I was going to study it. And so that's how I got into Emma, which became a big part of my life.
Okay. So just going back to Unity for a minute there, you had some experiences. You created a course. Could you tell us about that?
A couple of things I did. It's so funny when you look back, and did I really do that? It was so weird. And I found my outline, and I was surprised because it was actually the intention was a Sunday school lesson. I didn't even remember that. And so I had this, I drew this rose circle for the Little Prince, which I was bound and determined to create a metaphysical explanation for it, even though it's not metaphysical in a way. I mean, it wasn't meant to be metaphysical, but that really occupied me for a long time. And I ended up being invited to first ever international Unity conference to make the presentation about the Little Prince. And I did it in French, German, and English. I did it like in 3 languages, and it was so well received.
So can you tell us a little bit about, I think it was called Journey of the Soul. So what is it about that story that brought you into metaphysical, meaning beyond the physical place?
Well, this was I didn't tell you, I didn't share this experience that when I heard somebody present Jonathan Livingston Seagull a number of times, my inner voice kept saying, the Little Prince, the Little Prince, the Little Prince. And I said, I don't like that book. Leave me alone. I don't want to do that. And so anyway, I surrendered. I ended up surrendering, and I used it to, I don't really consciously do these things, but I kind of started to read it all and over and over, and to try to figure out what the metaphysics of it was, because the big thing in Unity is metaphysics. And so I had a few, I looked at the outline I had, and I said, wow, that's pretty good outline, Maria. It's like not too bad. And so in the beginning of the Little Prince story, he draws, he asks the author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, to draw a sheep. and the author draws a hat with looks like it's a boa constrictor with an elephant in it, basically. And so the whole idea of perception, of how we perceive things, like the intention of somebody drawing something and we look at it, we do not have the same perception. We cannot match the perception of some of the intention. So the lesson is that the prince kind of felt that adults were kind of didn't have any imagination, that you had to have imagination. And so it's a long story. I don't want to go into it specifically, but the prince goes in the desert. So that would be the time we find ourselves, like we go to our high inner guidance and our higher self, and to kind of get away from the world. And then the sheep drawing never materializes, and the author got frustrated and drew a box with little holes in it. And so the idea that was for me, okay, like that was my interpretation. It's not something that's a public interpretation, that this box was the divine idea of a sheep, where we would be looking at peeking in the box, and everybody would see their own kind of sheep, you know, even though we didn't know what the exact sheep was in there, right, in the box, but the box would represent the wholeness of the idea of a sheep, metaphysically, right? Does that make sense?
It's about the perception.
The perception in that sense. And then the prince goes on a trip. And so I would say that he went on this soul journey, and he meets these different kinds of people. But before he leaves, he has this planet, and he has these baobab trees that grow there, and they have seeds. And so he has to pull the seeds to make sure that they don't overgrow the planet. So that would be like pulling out, making sure that what we think is clear and pure, so that it doesn't overtake us, that kind of feel, that kind of thought. And then he has volcanoes, and he had to clean the volcano. So that's taking care of our feelings, right, of affirmation and denials and things like that. And just in the end, he has this rose, and that represents love. And so there's all this journey, and then in the end, he surrenders his body to return to the rose, because the rose represents his heart and his love. And so he gives up his body, and it's a beautiful story. It's hard to tell the whole thing. I want to, but it's a long time.
Yeah, we don't. But that is really, it's very creative, and clearly that came from within. So I was impressed when you shared that with me. Would you like to talk about Emma a little bit? Emma Curtis Hopkins.
Right.
I love your story of the book just falling off of the shelf.
It did literally.
The way she came into your life.
Right. It was amazing. And see, like, when these things happen, I am not really conscious that these things happen, but more in hindsight, I see what happened there, how it all came to be. And so I was bound and determined to understand this high mysticism, like just no big deal, right? I was going to do that, I can do all things, right? So I was going to do that. And I couldn't really kind of go through the congested text. It was so, it would kind of like not compute, but the main ideas did compute. So I highlighted these main ideas, and I still didn't kind of feel that I understood it and knew it. And so I decided to type up all those highlights, to make my own kind of abbreviated version of high mysticism. And that became completely a labor of love. And when I started writing, typing, I noticed I was in a transcended state of mind, and it felt like I lost time. I couldn't, I just was totally and completely focused in the text, and was totally clear, absolutely clear when I was typing it and being focused on it. And the next day I wouldn't remember what it was at all. It was like this place in me that recognized a higher consciousness, but I couldn't stay in it. I still can't stay in it, but it's like going back and forth, right?
I think we should backtrack a little bit because there may be people in our audience who don't know who Emma is.
Okay.
Maybe we could spend a few minutes talking about who is Emma Curtis Hopkins.
Sure. Thanks for guiding me.
That is actually my fault. So
I've never done an interview like this, so you have to guide me, and you have to excuse me.
This is my first as well. So
see, there you go. So anyway, Emma Curtis Hopkins was called the teacher of teachers in the New Thought movement. And she was instrumental in even starting the New Thought movement.
And New Thought is unity would be part of New Thought.
Yes, unity, religious science, divine science, a home of truth. They were mostly like around. So she was born in 1849, and she made her transition in 1925. And her last private student was Ernest Holmes. So she influenced Ernest Holmes greatly also because he was one-on-one teaching.
And Ernest Holmes wrote The Science of Mind.
Science of Mind.
It's also called religious science.
Religious science, yes.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, how it all started was that she was completely impersonal, so we don't know hardly anything about her, but she had a way to entrain people into a higher consciousness just by her presence, and her words carry a transmission of consciousness. But we have to read it and learn it, right? We have to be willing participants in order to benefit from that. So the fact that I was really plunging into the text really gave me that transmission of consciousness. So she was giving classes, and she was encouraging her students to go all over the place and teach and start centers. And it turned out that Myrtle Fillmore heard E.B. Weeks, one of Emma Curtis' students, say, you are a child of God, and as a child of God, you cannot inherit disease. And Myrtle Fillmore had tuberculosis, and so she was not well at the time, but she took that sentence home and started practicing healing with that sentence from Emma Curtis Hopkins. And she did heal herself through affirmations and through speaking to her body, to all the body, apologizing for having thought ill of her body and so on. So that's a story that started the connection between Emma Curtis Hopkins and the Fillmores. Charles Fillmore then also, he had a withered leg, and so he wanted to prove it intellectually. He was going to prove that this was actually really working. And so he also then started working with affirmations and the kind of prayer that Emma was teaching. They went to the first theological course. I don't know if they came to Chicago or if Emma went to Kansas City, but they were ordained by Emma Curtis Hopkins, the Fillmores, the founders of Unity. So that's how this fits together with Unity and so on. And the textbook for Unity is Emily Cady's Lessons in Truth. And Emily Cady was a direct student of Emma. So you have these connections.
Yeah, and I understand that it's said that Emma taught 50,000 students in her lifetime.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today. If she taught for 50 years, that would be 1,000 students a year, which in the late 1800s, early 1900s was, that was quite a feat.
Well, I think that she didn't personally really teach that many, but by transference, like through her students, they spread out like a kind of like a, what do you call that? Exponentially, I think, right? Exponentially, she influenced 50,000 students. She ordained 111, and which is one of the things that we all like is that she ordained women, of course. So that was the big thing, is like women can get ordained. And so that was my goal, is to get ordained through this teaching, through unity.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So back to your, I guess it would be a transcription of her book, High Mysticism, which, I found very interesting. You had shared with me and some others a graph that you had made of her different writings, and many of her writings were probably, we think they were written by her students, including Scientific Christian Mental Practice, but High Mysticism, I believe, was written by her. So yes. What you're saying is that high consciousness that she had came directly through her writings to you.
To me, yes. Yeah. And you can tell if there's the first theological course that was for practitioners. It's called Christian Science Notes. It was never published until recently because it said Christian Science, and Christian Science doesn't like the words to be used for other texts. But Emma did use it generically, and so the Christian Science notes, when you read that, it's simpler than High Mysticism, but you can feel her consciousness there. Whereas when you read scientific, it's a lot more mental. It's like it's so awesome. I mean, it's not like there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just the feeling you get. So she, for example, the Judgment series and Esoteric Philosophy, she wrote all those, Résumé, and you can tell. But like they published the class lessons of 1888, which was compiled by her students. Scientific was compiled by her students, and so a lot of her Bible studies were potentially compiled by her students.
And I've been rereading again the Highwatch books that you've really written, transcribing High Mysticism. And when I read them, I can see influence of so many ancient teachings. And she uses words and language coming from many different places. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about her background, how she came to that consciousness in her studies, and then ultimately her practices.
In the Judgment series. So I just want to tell you, all of her works are available through Wise Woman Press. I'm not connected to Wise Woman Press, but all her works have been published now pretty much. So you can find those, or even on Amazon. So I just want to go back to my writings. They are like literally cliff notes of High Mysticism actually in Emma's words. So they are not, there are none of my words in there at all. There is no opinion. There is no commentary, my personal commentary or anything like that. All of it is directly out of High Mysticism, and just like a Reader's Digest version or like a Cliff Notes version, which I have in 2 volumes. Volume 1 is Realizing the Christ in You, and then the second volume is Realizing the Christ One in All. So first one was about it's about us, the first 6 chapters, and the second, the 7th to 12th is always ministry. So going back to how she came about, I don't know if she had some kind of if she was channeling. We don't know. We don't know anything about her personally, but in the Judgment series, she says to read the 5 or 6 most well-known scriptures once, and then the one that you are drawn to, read that one 3 times. Now you're talking about 1800s, right? Like early 1900s. So women weren't really having access to all these books and everything, and she did have access through her family. Her husband was a very good, like a teacher. He was doing, I think he was teaching geometry, but even higher, probably whatever. I'm not really familiar with those things, but like trigonometry or whatever. Here comes my French accent. So yeah, and she then she then knew those texts, and she learned Greek so that she would be able to read the text without translation in Greek. I don't know if she did learn Hebrew, but a lot of her writings appear to be related to Kabbalah, to the Hebrew teachings. So that's why I am so interested in all of those things.
And I also, she refers to the Upanishads and the Vedas, yes, and she uses some terminology from those scriptures as well.
Right.
So, and she refers to the self a lot with a capital S, which is, an Eastern tradition. So it's just fascinating.
That's the thing about the text. When I worked this, I was a lot more like into a spiritual text, into biblical text, because unity encourages that. Of course, in the meantime, I'm a religious science minister, but that was my focus at the time. And so I recognized every Bible verse I recognized, I referenced it, because she doesn't reference anything. So what I put in the front of my book is that if you can reference anything else from the Upanishad or the Vedas or any other sacred text, the Book of the Dead, please do it, right? If that's what you like to work with, then that will be your incredible time for you to really dive into her work with that comparison.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel, and I know many others, because we just completed a class with you, some of us from our local church here, and we could feel the energetic transmission. And my sense about it is it was coming through you to us.
Yeah.
But I also feel it personally when I read her directly, the transcriptions. I know those are her words, and I can feel that consciousness. It's very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's an interesting spiritual practice that you developed.
Yeah, so I read it, or I put it on cassette. The first book, I put it on, I recorded it for myself. You should have seen that project. I mean, imagine the hours and hours and hours I spent twisting my tongue and trying to correct, because if you try to read something like that, and the simplest words are like, they don't come out right. So then you have to keep editing. And I learned how to put music in. And so I made these little tracks. I do have it. I don't sell it, but I'm happy to share it. And I didn't do the second book, but the first one, I have it all recorded in my own voice.
Yeah.
Then I listen to it. See, when I listen to it, I go into that place of higher consciousness.
Yeah, I understand that. Before we move on, because we have some other interesting topics to talk about, I'd just like to open up the room and ask if anyone has any questions. Just trying to look at both screens here. Okay, I think not. So let's move on a little bit. Can you tell us, Ute Maria, about how the Hermetic Kabbalah came into your life and the sacred tarot, and what is that anyway? That might be the place to start.
So in conjunction with the time I was working with Emma, it was at the same kind of time, because I had a church in a Unity Church for a while. I was a spiritual leader for about 6 years, and I didn't have the skills with guiding people, and so it didn't really work out. So I ended up leaving that. But then I did know quite a few people, and one of the congregants was an older lady who was a Christian Scientist, and we were real close. I would drive her and we'd hang out, and she's unfortunately started losing her thinking capacity, and so they had to move her into the nursing area. And so she had all these books and everything in her apartment. And I didn't want to come across like I wanted anything, but I saw this book. And I said to her, would it be okay if I had this book? It was called The Mystical Language. And it had the Hebrew letters on it, where the tetragrammaton, if you know the sacred name of God, tetragrammaton, Yod, He, Vav, He. And I just didn't even look in it. I just wanted that book. And then I went home, and another one of my congregants I was hanging out with, and she was a Mensa member, and brilliant person, and all kinds of, she knew all kinds of things. And she came to my house, and I said, look at what I have. And I showed her this book, and she says, oh, I've been member of that school for years, want to see some of the classes. And I said, oh yeah, do I want to see? Oh, absolutely, right. And so she went down to her house and came back with all these shopping bags with envelopes, and here. And so all of these envelopes, they weren't even opened. And so I pulled them all out and I put them all in order and everything, and nothing was missing. It was all of these classes that were a certain amount of, they're like in one set series, there would be like 10 or 12, and then another one, layers. And so I said, oh, this is gold. This is absolute total gold. I need this. And so I went and had it all copied. And then I took it home. And a couple of days after that, my friend came back and she says, oh my goodness. She says, I shouldn't talk about this publicly, but it is what it is. This is how it happened. And she says, oh my goodness, I gave you those lessons. I shouldn't have. I signed a contract that I wouldn't give those lessons away to anybody. And I thought, well, Spirit must have wanted me to have them because I had them, right? And so I started studying the tarot. And just jumping back to Emma for a second, because I just remember that, because I was, when I moved from that church, like just in that time when I lost my center and I moved to something else, just at the tail end of that, we moved into another place, but we couldn't stay there. We had to move out of it. It was some kind of zoning issue. And so now I'm again in those clearing out cabinets, right? And I just remembered that. So one of the drawers, and they told me, you just take what you want. If there's something you want, you can take it. And like I said, the Emma books were not published at the time, only those two books, right? Only Scientific and High Mysticism. And lo and behold, there was a stack this high in the drawer of Emma manuscripts.
Original manuscripts from her?
Well, they're like manuscripts from her Highwatch fellowship that they had typed all her work.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I had again, you see how it falls into my hands when I started telling about the book, right? Yeah. I remembered, I said, oh, I totally forgot about that. It was a complete gold mine. And then I started typing those too. And they also got me into that kind of transcendent state of mind.
Yeah, you definitely have a history with books and manuscripts coming to you.
And then Michael Terranova, who owned the, who is now owner of the Wise Woman Press, he put out on the internet, does anybody have any works of Emma? Because I'm committed to publishing them. So he received all my typing and all the text. So he published it.
And so this is why all of these works are available today.
I am part of it. It was me, but there's somebody else, several other people, like Isabel, for example. Okay. She was a friend of mine. She also helped to publish, and Natalie Jean from the East Coast, from Maryland. Lots of people involved. So going back to, sorry, I backtracked on that. So then when I started studying these classes, they are a Western mystery school called BOTA, Builders of the Adytum. The website, I have a hard time typing stuff, but it's called BOTA.org.
I'll type it in. I can type it
because I'm focused on just talking with you. So that. BOTA.org is a Western mystery school, which came out of the Golden Dawn and some other teachings from that, from this kind of mystery traditions. And it is called, it is the Hermetic Kabbalah, which is then, it's very ancient, and there have been a lot of contributions to make it what it is today, to make it approachable for people like us, for Western minds. And the difference is because Eastern minds have yoga and these types of teaching, and the builders of the Adytum say that people from the Western world have a different kind of outlook. That there's Western and Eastern, but of course a lot of us do both. But in general, the Western mysteries are more approachable for Western minds, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And so that's why it's called the Western mysteries. And Hermetic comes from Hermes Trismegistus, who is supposedly in the lineage of Abraham, way back, a biblical lineage, and it's not a real person. It was like a group of wise men who then produced the work. And Paul Foster Case, who started the Builders of the Adytum, had a relation with somebody from the other side. He was communicating with, they call him Master R, and he was receiving downloads through this being person from the other side. And he then created these teachings, but he was very open to these teachings too. And he created the correlations of the tarot keys with numbers and the Hebrew letters. So the if you want to read up on this, I recommend the Hermetic Kabbalah by Dr. Paul Clark. It's not from that school, but if you want to really read up on this more, then this is like the whole teachings of the Hermetic Kabbalah, like more like a.
Can you just give us an idea of like how does this differ from Kabbalah, like what we normally think of as Kabbalah, and what are the teachings in it?
Well, Kabbalah is spelled in different ways, and so the Hermetic Kabbalah is with a Q. This Qabalah. That differentiates the difference. But the Kabbalah Hebrew word means receiving. It's a gift that we receive, and from ancient teachers. And in Judaism, Kabbalah is more strictly connected to the Zohar, to the really the deep study of the Hebrew language and gematria and midrash. Where they study all of all of the Torah is very much more seriously related to Judaism. Let's put it that way. It's more like a modern kind of version in a way of Judaism, the Kabbalah of Judaism.
What we normally think of as Kabbalah.
Kabbalah. Well, most people don't know what Kabbalah is anyway.
But the for people that do, like we here have studied Kabbalah.
Of course,
together. So
of course.
What you're explaining now would be what we would think of as the Kabbalah. Is that correct?
Right. And I don't know what you studied and what the other side of it would be, like the corresponding side of it. When you study the Kabbalah, do you study the Tree of Life?
No, it's more the oneness through Ein Sof, which Emma refers to Ein Sof, but that's it's like the Tao,
right?
The Tao, it's everything. It's the universal that underlies all life and all presence. It's the absolute, really. Right. And then the light coming through, and there was an explosion. I'm remembering back to my course. It's been a while, I think form emanates ultimately from the explosion of the light.
Right.
This is, if I'm remembering it correctly.
In Bota, they talk about the concentration of light, like a very tight concentration that then disperses into form, into substance. Yes. Okay, into substance.
That's the same then.
It's the same. It is the same. Yes. Except that you didn't have the tarot keys that go with it, right?
So is that what distinguishes the Hermetic, is the study of the tarot keys?
I don't know if it's the Hermetic or if it's just the mystery, this esoteric mystery school that teaches it. Like, have you ever heard of the Golden Dawn?
Mm-hmm.
They did a lot of the tarot. They were teaching the tarot. They had the Rider-Waite deck. It is the most well-known deck, and what Builders of the Adytum has a version of that, but it's slightly alterated because it's adding certain elements to it. So the keys in this case, they are placed in. When you talk about, we call it the Ein Sof hour, which is the highest light, right? The Ein Sof hour is the light, the limitless light. The limitless light is in everything and is everything. Everything is, so it's showing the journey of the soul through images. It's showing how you can look at an image and meditate on that image, and your subconscious mind recognizes the archetypal ideas in that image. This has nothing to do.
Where are those images?
Pardon me?
Is that the tarot?
Yes.
The images are the tarot cards.
Tarot keys, yeah. Tarot
keys.
We call them keys because we don't want to mix them up with cards because it gives the wrong impression. We're not doing cards. We're studying archetypal ideas or thoughts or what I don't know. I know that we want to avoid thoughts, but we also want to purify our thoughts and our ego, and that's part of that. So there is a path. Let's say it's like a path, like the prodigal son goes to a far country and then returns. And so this tree of life with the tarot keys is like this idea of going out and returning and going out and returning. And every time we return to the top of the tree, which is really the bottom of the tree because it's inverted, to the light, to the keter, the crown, we bring back more of the wisdom that we have learned through that journey going through the tree, which is, I mean, we don't actually really go, we don't really think about it that much, but the idea of having a plan, having a system to learn, and that teaches us how to think in that way. So it's a 13-year course. It includes everything that you can think of. Astrology, gematria, color and sound vibration. And I'm not there yet because I'm always doing something else. So I'm slow. But basically the beginning is that you learn these keys and the 22 major arcana keys.
And just to be clear, because when I think of tarot, I think of divination. You don't do that at all.
No.
It's not readings. So these cards are used to really assist us on our spiritual journey. To
meditate.
To higher consciousness. So can you perhaps explain some of these keys? The keys are the cards, right? It's
right. Right.
Like explain how that works and what your practice is with them.
Okay, the first thing when you join this particular course, it's very cheap. It's only like $18 a month. So for 5 lessons. So I mean, most people can afford it. It's just they like you to be members so that the teachings aren't misused. You know, so because it's powerful, it's very powerful. We can misuse our creative power, but then it's not because you have lessons like that you would misuse it. It's just people misuse it or use it well. That's the human condition, right? But so I have pulled up a couple of cards. If it's possible to share my screen, and if not, then I can show you the tarot tableau, so you have just an idea of.
Absolutely. I have one question before we do that, because you mentioned the tree of life, and I'm just wondering how that fits in with the tarot cards. That's
what I need to show you.
Okay, great. Okay.
I have a hard time kind of like, yeah, this is what it is, and then you see, it's basically, it's a visual teaching. And I am very visual. I really learn better if I have, like, you see how I wrote it. Yes. And then I'm much more likely to remember or listen, both visual and listening. So if I don't know if this is set up for me to share or not.
I believe it is, because we had talked about that internally here, that you can screen share. So Sina is saying yes, and she's managing the call.
Okay, so here is what the key. Here are the keys that I put. They are together in something called the tableau, the tarot tableau, and it represents the potential, like the Ein Sof Or at the top, and the sun is like what cannot be described. The white sun at the top in the corner here is where all the light comes from. It's the light itself, right? And the Fool is going on this journey, and this key has a lot of the symbolism that's repeated in all the other keys. So it has I would say that it represents super consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it is a field of potentiality. Nothing is formed at that point. It's just that all of the elements are there, and the four worlds, like the animal, vegetable, and mineral, animal, vegetable, and human and spiritual, that they are all represented there in this key. And then you have the magician, who is like the self-consciousness, represents self-consciousness, who is what's the first key here. Now we put the fool up here because he doesn't belong in this particular manifested part of the teachings. I mean, of life. It's the potential. It's the absolute, right? So that's not part of the expression. Mm-hmm. And so the magician has all these tools with which he can create his experience. And he holds up a wand to the fool, because he is self-consciousness, and self-consciousness always has to subject itself to super consciousness. It's kind of like science of mind and also unity, where we learn this kind of principles of the superconscious, the self-conscious, and the subconscious, right? So now the high priestess represents the subconscious mind. And then the next is the empress. It's the creative process, the creative imagination. And I'm not going to go on, but this is how it works. And these particular tableau, which is all the 22 major arcana, are the stages, is one of the lessons, stages of spiritual unfoldment. So the first one, so it's kind of like what we do with our lives would create this bondage to something that we imagine. That's what the devil is. The devil is not real. It's not, it doesn't have, it's impossible to have that kind of form, like with the feet of a bird and horns of a sheep and ear. I mean, that doesn't exist. So you're supposed to laugh at it. It's like, okay, I laugh at it. And the humans who are tied to it, they are tied loosely. So it's saying you can get out of this. You can get out of bondage. It's up to you to get out of bondage, right? So these are the stages. So the first one is bondage, which is also in unity. The first lesson always is bondage or liberty. Which one? Which do you choose? So let me just say, this is a very, very deep and intense study. So I can only touch the tiniest tip. But just to say, so we have awakening is the next column here going down. So I decided I was going to pull those keys up, and because we are in awakening together, so we'll look at those. So here, looking at them closer, as I mentioned, the high priestess represents the subconscious mind, and it remembers everything. The subconscious mind is the record of all things, and it controls a lot of the things we do, even though we don't know. And I don't need to tell you that, you know that. And but in this key is very interesting because it's showing the symbolism of the Kabbalion, the Hermetic principles. So the Kabbalion is this is what the teachings are based on in the Hermetic teachings. And I have I don't know them by heart. I was going to write them down, but let's say the 7 principles that are represented in this key is mentalism, correspondence, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and cause and effect. So the polarity would be like the black and the white pillars. The rhythm would be the water, and the Torah, the scroll, which is rolled up, which represent rhythm. Contrast the two colors as opposite one another, and so on. And so, yes,
sorry, are those Hebrew letters on the columns?
Right. So this is the. Now I should have reviewed that one, but I don't know it by heart. But I know it's the Boaz and the Joaz and Boaz, something at the door of the temple in the Old Testament. But the key has a letter, Hebrew letter, each key. And so this is the Gimel, this is a Yod, and this is a Pei. So the number 2, now because you don't count the 0, 1, 2, and then 9 with the Yod, and then 16 the tower, which is from this tableau, right, in this order. And the Hebrew letter, it's so interesting because when we look at the Old Testament, the translation of the Old Testament, we think that something can be translated and that's the end all of the meaning of the Old Testament. But in reality, you cannot really translate a Hebrew word because a letter has multiple layers of meanings. That's why they have the Zohar, which is like the whole book is about this one letter. This would be like, the word for it is camel and represents traveling through the desert, transportation, the movement between the subconscious and the conscious mind, kind of like on that level.
So when you're working with a key, you've got so much symbolism here.
Right.
What is your practice with it?
I first of all, we color the keys. We have the colors are given. We have this little booklet. It's a tiny booklet with instructions on how to color the keys. Everybody can get a set and color them.
So they come. It's like a coloring book in a way.
Well, they're cards and they come in black and white.
Yeah, and you fill in the colors according to the
color them.
And what does that do for you in terms of a spiritual practice?
It imprints the symbolism in your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind recognizes the symbolism. So I might not be able to say what it means, but my subconscious mind is affected by those symbols and it changes my life. And it's very subtle. It's very subtle. Like you can't really grasp it or like say, oh, this is what happened as a result of this. It's like this very, very subtle kind of shift in consciousness that happens from it.
And you have experienced that, or you continue?
Oh, yes. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
Beautiful. So
yes.
That's quite an interesting practice. So just looking at the time here, I'm wondering if anyone has any questions, but I can't see the screen now.
Okay, I can get out since we cannot really go any deeper on that. So stop sharing. There you go.
So
all right.
See if, does anyone have any questions?
I was just going to show you the tree of life. That's all.
That would be great. Yeah, okay. I don't see any questions. So
I want to
have a question.
Okay.
The tower, it looked almost like the third image was a Tower of Babel. People were falling out. So as part of the awakening, the destruction process?
Actually, it's when the spirit zaps your ego with the high energy, like it has a flash of lightning, which is the path of the light through the tree, and it hits you and you change. So people are afraid of the tower, but in reality is when spirit hits us, like what Christy was talking about, how she goes from the mind to the heart. That's what happens. Something like that.
Okay.
It's like it's the will, our personal will is destroyed in a way, so that the divine will can move through us.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Laura Joy has a question.
Yes.
Thanks. Hi.
Hi.
All right. Hey. I'm moving into a new house, so I'm cleaning a new apartment. This has, first of all, been so wonderful. So thank you. And this isn't specifically related to the tarot, but it is a sacred geometry question.
Yes.
Is this the appropriate time, or should I wait?
No, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Many, many years ago, I had this extraordinary dream that led me to learning about a little bit about the Hebrew letters and the that there were energy signatures and the creation of space and all of that. But what was so remarkable about the dream, before I learned all of that, I was standing in the middle of a field, so the symbology of that, but there were these gigantic shapes, one by one, being projected in the sky, and there was like a disembodied narrator speaking. So complicated in the dream, I even was like, how am I ever going to remember this or understand it? But what I do remember was he was saying that each shape, a culture was based on each one of these shapes. And the last one I remember, which was a very elongated diamond with a little tiny human at the base, they said was Egypt. And it went on, but I won't go on, but it was quite remarkable. So I wondered if you had any similar knowledge of something like that idea.
Well, the tree of life is pure sacred geometry. Okay, tree of life that I'll show you, that's pure sacred geometry. And yes, absolutely. I mean, everything is sacred geometry. It's the matrix of the universe. And so that's all connected. You know, I went to all of these things like the flower of life. So I don't know if I have it right here, but my logo is actually sacred geometry. It's the Merkaba and the science of mind symbol. And so then, you know, it has all the different religions around it. So it's definitely sacred geometry. Yes, absolutely. And it all fits together. It's all one. It's like when Christy was saying the light kind of like breaks up, right, into, I would say, fractals, and fractals are geometry too. And we are all fractals of the light. Everything is a fractal of the light. That, yeah. And of course, there's a whole teaching. You see, like I was telling Christy, if you put a quarter in me, I'll keep going. Okay, that's what happens. Okay, it's like the ever ready bunny, because I got all these things going. And so there is a teaching about the Hebrew letters, which is Stan Bannon, I think it is, about the Hebrew letters in your hands. And it's talking about how the Hebrew letters were formed out of sacred geometry, out of and they were like the feminine side of the masculine shapes, that was the flame. That's why it's called the flame language. It's the fire, life. And they say that this language is given to us by the angels. I don't know. I don't have these lucid dreams. You're lucky.
Thank you.
That was a beautiful question. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Melissa, I see your hand up as well.
My question is short and sweet, but oh my gosh, I love all this. And I know the alphabet. I took Hebrew school as a child, but now I have this whole renewed excitement and energy. Thank you. And where can I sign? Is it through boda.org that you can take?
Yes. Just sign up and they'll start sending you 4 lessons a month.
And what is the course? It's called Hermetic Kabbalah?
No, BOTA is builder. It's builders of the Adytum. Builders of the Adytum, BOTA. So BOTA.org. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's good stuff. I love it so much.
Yeah, and Adytum is Adydum. I think it's DUM, right?
Adytum, Adytum,
Oh,
yes.
TUM.
Yeah.
So, which is the inner sanctuary. So, Ute Maria, do you feel like we talked, through Laura's question, did we talk about the tree of life? Or do you have
Well, I'm
something?
just going to show you real quick the picture, okay? That's
Okay.
it. How much time we have left?
It's 8:42, and we want to talk about the Lord's Prayer as well.
Okay. So we're going to finish with that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so share screen. And so I just have a picture up, so that's easy one.
Oh,
Can you see that?
yes.
So this is the tree of life that we study in this mystery school. And you will see that each of the paths will have one of the tarot keys on it. It's very organized, but this is definitely like sacred geometry. And if you put like, I don't know how many in a circle, it would be like all of them around to create the whole circle. And it's got 10, what you call 10 sephira. And the 10 sephira, each one has their specific teaching. And so this is the kingdom, which would be the earth, like our life, the physical life. And this is the crown, which is the white sun, the Eins of Or, which is actually, that's not true, because the Eins of Or is above the crown. It's beyond the crown. The crown is already, in a sense, a visible light, but above it is the limitless light. I have like this. This is the pattern of the trestle board. You can get it on. Also, you get it with the cards if you order the cards, but it's also online. Pattern of the trestle board. So I just want to tell you one of the sentences is called. It says, I look forward with confidence to the perfect realization of the eternal splendor of the limitless light. It's my favorite one. And that would be like this idea of the splendor here. But each one has a sentence, an affirmation, which you would like, we like to learn by heart. And so we start at 0, and then we go to 1, 1, 2, and then each one is represents wisdom, understanding, severity, mercy, splendor, victory, and then beauty. That's where all the heart is. That's where we learn about being like what Christy was talking about in her talk about moving from the head to the heart and staying there. And then, so then we go back up again and down again through these keys. And every time we learn another layer. And so that's only like the part of, and the colors are also vibrations. Everything has meaning. Everything has a meaning. And so this would be the 32 paths, and each of the circles is a path, and then the paths. So it's a huge study, and it's very involved, but I totally love it. And one of the things is for me is, okay, I'm going to be retiring eventually in the next few years. And I was like kind of worried about what would I have to do during retirement. Well, I tell you what, I got plenty to study. Yeah, I've got like layers and layers and stuff to study. I'll never run out of stuff to study. So I'm a happy girl. When I finish working, I'm going to be more focused on this.
Thank you.
So yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Thank you.
So how is that?
Tree of life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's so much in there.
I can see that. It's and it's all symbolic, right?
It is.
It is. And energetic, vibrational as well.
Right. Right.
And
it's ancient teachings.
Just very quickly, because I do want to talk about the Lord's Prayer, but Judy had asked a question about, is I guess the energetic vibration that comes through with the tarot, is that similar or the same as what you experienced when you worked with Emma? You know, that transmission.
Only when I color, only when I'm totally focused on the image and I think about that image, yes. If I meditate on that image and put it together, how it goes with the other images, then yes.
Is that your main practice, the coloring?
Well, I haven't been doing a whole lot of practice, mostly studying, but the coloring is done. So all my keys are colored, but then we color another set too. So these are big ones. So these are like a half a page, right? They're like as big. So that takes quite a while to color the big ones. They also have small ones, so you can color a small one. But it imprints in your brain, in your subconscious.
Yeah.
And it does stuff. I don't know. It
seems to me very similar to what you experienced, the way you described it.
Yeah,
when you were typing Emma's words. You know,
it is in a way. Yes.
Yeah. Not the intellectual part, but when you start the coloring, working with the symbols.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then you also study what the symbol means. And so then you kind of make this collage of symbols that all go on this particular key. And then you learn this really well. You have this really imprinted. Then you go to the next one and then you start seeing kind of like correlations. See, that's how you practice the study, is to see the correlations, to kind of there is a thing I was going to mention, is the inner school. It's called the inner school. And the inner school, when you're really serious and when you really want to study this, it comes through. It's an inner teacher.
Yeah.
That comes through. And I don't know if that happened to me yet or not, but I'm getting a lot out of it when I get time.
I talking to you over the years and especially lately, it sounds to me as though the inner teacher has been very active in your life in many ways. Coming through. So that's my perception anyway, just to share that with you. So let's talk about the Lord's Prayer, because you chant the Lord's Prayer in Jesus's native language, which is Aramaic. So I'm just wondering how you came to do that. Like, how did you even know about that? And why do you do that? Tell us something about it.
You know, I was trying to remember when I started with that. And I think it was a lecture by Rocco Errico years ago, maybe early 1990s, when I was used to go to Unity School for training for like 2 weeks at a time. And that came up. And Rocco had said that his teacher, Lamza, said that this is very powerful to learn it in the, Aramaic, because it has a lot of energy, vibration in it. And Neil Douglas Klotz, who I follow, he's a Sufi, and he had a teacher who said that before he dies, before he makes his transition, he wants to learn this prayer in Aramaic. They weren't even talking about chanting that much. It was just like, learn to speak the prayer, because that was like the most important thing to him he wanted to do before he made his transition. Why? I don't know. But I guess that's kind of what kind of got me going on that. It's like, oh, I wonder what that is, right? And then I started studying Neil Douglas Klotz, and I had a cassette tape, and I had a long drive, and I would just play it over and over and over and over. It's a teaching tape. So he keeps on teaching the verse, and it keeps on over and over. And so I started chanting with him, and it's a very long chant, but I made it shorter for me so that it's not so long.
Okay.
And so Neil Douglas Klotz learned Aramaic just because he wanted to translate the prayer. This is big. I mean, that's a big thing in his life.
Yeah. Neil Douglas Klotz, anyone in Awakening Together who's a minister here has studied his book called The Sufi Book of Life.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, you know, I would have to say in the past few days from my talks with you, I've been on his website and I'm just enchanted with his work. It's so powerful. And it reminds me of, you know, all of these other practices that you're talking about, starting from when you listen to Gregorian chant as a child and typing Emma and the, you know, the sacred tarot and working with the Hebrew letters and the colors and the symbols. It's something it's a learning that's beyond the mind. It goes to direct knowing. And it's just very powerful. So,
thank you, Christy. See, I don't see that at all about myself. I just do it, right? I live it. And I think maybe that's the way to do it, is to just be present in the moment with what you're so interested in and just do whatever it feels like from the heart. This is what I want to study now. And, you know, not be put in a box because, you know, I'm a Science of Mind minister. I have to only do that. I'm not saying that that would be required, but if I were in other denomination, it would mean that you can't do that. So I'm feeling so free. And it's to me, it's amazing that anybody would really be interested in all of this. It's like, somebody wants to hear all this. You know, it's like, okay.
Listen, we have 7 minutes left.
Okay.
How long does it take you to chant? Because I have another question, but I want you
I can do the chant, but I want to read the one translation first. But
I would just like you to talk a little bit about, you know, I mean, probably most people here know what the Lord's Prayer is and could recite it, because we basically all in this country anyway learn the same prayer. But what is different about this? That's
why I want to read to you the translation that Neil Douglas Klotz wrote. So what he did was translate each verse in 7 ways. So this little book called Prayers of the Cosmos gives you all of these translations. And so he picked one out of the 7 for each verse.
Okay.
So when I chant, this is what the meaning behind the chant is, right? Okay. O birther, father, mother of the cosmos, focus your light within us, make it useful. Create your reign of unity now. Your one desire then acts with ours, as in all light, so in all forms. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight. Loose the cords of mistakes binding us as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt. Don't let surface things delude us, but free us from what holds us back. From you is born all ruling will. I get emotional. From you is born all ruling will, the power and the life to do, the song that beautifies all, from age to age it renews. Truly power to these statements, may they be the ground from which all my actions grow. Amen.
It's beautiful.
So that's only one of the translations. So
yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about the Aramaic, and I heard you mention it about the Hebrew letters too. There are layers and layers of meaning. So words and letters and even statements, they don't have one meaning. They have many, many meanings.
They have, because each letter has its own kind of, it's like an idea, like a concept. Each letter is a concept. So when you put like 4 concepts together, how are you going to translate that into English?
Yeah.
The whole, you know, cross the intention. And of course, I love it a lot because it is like Hebrew. See, it's related to Hebrew.
Yes.
And Jesus' language, the temple language, was Hebrew, but the common people spoke Aramaic. So all his teachings were in Aramaic.
So we have 3 minutes left. Do you have enough time to chant for
Yes,
us? And that
absolutely.
can be our closing prayer.
Yes. Okay. So after that, we'll just finish, right?
Yes. So I will say thank you now on
into-
behalf of myself and everyone here. It's been a beautiful evening, and thank you for sharing with us.
I'm delighted. Thank you for having me. Avunda Shemaya, Avunda Shemaya, Avunda Shemaya, Avunda Shemaya. Niskadishmach, 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 Niskadesh Shema. Tete Malkutach, Tete Malkutach, Tete Malkutach, Tete Malkutach, Tete Malkutach, Tete Malkutach, Tete Malkutach. Nechwetzivianach haikana, debashamaya af be'arha. Nechwetzivianach haikana, debashamaya af be'arha. Havlan lachma desun kenan yaumana. Havlan lachma desun kenan yaumana. Washbuklanachar bein wachtahin. I Canada frenan shvo chandel chaya bein. Washbuklanachar bein wachtahin. I Canada frenan shvo chandel chaya bein. Wela techelan lenesuna ela padzan min bisha. Wela techelan lenesuna ela padzan min bisha. Betol de la chemalkuta, wahaila wateshbuta, lelam almin amen. Lelam almin amen. Lelam almin amen. Lelam almin amen.
Thank you again for watching. For more information on our community or any other non-dual programs, you can visit our website, awakening-together.org. See you in the sanctuary.